On your trip back. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Y'all are going to get really hungry if you keep standing up like that, so I'm going to tell you now. One of the things that worries me a little bit is that I am the only thing standing between you and dinner. And I know there's a bunch of Baptists in here, and they scare me a lot when it comes to that. There is a honest thing. When I first got into politics, of course, I come out of about 12 years of being a pastor, and even though that's been almost 22 years ago, I still vividly remember, first campaign, I'm out there campaigning. A lady came up to me and said, I hear that you're an ordained Baptist minister. I said, well, yes, ma'am, that is correct. She said, well, let me ask you something. Are you one of those narrow-minded Baptists who think only Baptists are going to heaven? I said, lady, I'm more narrow than that because I don't think all the Baptists are going to make it. The Methodists love that. Bill, I want to say thanks for the gracious introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you here tonight. I'm so thrilled this many people in Barber County have come out, and I am ecstatic to be in this beautiful community. As we were coming into the Eufala today, seeing these amazing homes, just stunning. What a gorgeous community. I'm so glad that the Yankees didn't burn it down, because it would have been a shame to lose this great, charming city of the South. And Jeannie, I'm glad we were able to get the planes all worked out, because I'd have been really sorry to have missed the opportunity to be here tonight. And, my life is a little crazy. I have to be in New York every weekend. I was telling a group of folks earlier that sometimes people ask me if I'm going to move to New York, since I have to go up there every weekend for Fox. And I always just tell them, I ain't moving to New York till Mayor Bloomberg will let me duck hunt in Central Park. And I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. I want to say to you how thrilled I am to be here. First time I've had an opportunity to speak to a group of people since this incredible event that happened on Wednesday that really took, I think, the whole country totally off guard. And I'm grateful for every person in America who endured long lines and sitting in traffic. We had reports all over the country. It all started 2 weeks ago tonight. Truett Cathy was on my television show. He had been scheduled to be there for almost 2 months. And it was providential that his schedule just happened to be the very week that all this stuff with his son Dan Cathy had exploded and all the attacks had started coming at Chick-fil-A. Well, Chick-fil-A did not propose the Appreciation Day. They did not promote it. They just stayed out of it. I'm not sure if they wondered whether it would do more harm than good. I don't know. But here's what I believe with all my heart. Far too many times, good, decent, patriotic Christian people have taken a stand, and they stood tall, and they looked around, and nobody was standing with them. Nobody was standing with them. And everybody looks and sees that, and they say, well, I'll tell you what, I'll think twice before I take the stand. And when I heard and I read some of the things that have been said towards Dan Cathy specifically, and I've done some events in the past, Mayor's Prayer Breakfast, and a couple of things in various places with Truett Cathy. And I knew of the family, and I knew of their unwavering commitment to their Christian faith and to just being good community corporate citizens. Everywhere they are, they invest heavily into their communities. They've given over $13 million in scholarships so that their employees can go to college. They started the foundation. They provide incredible assistance, millions and millions of dollars worth of assistance to foster kids and to help kids get adopted. So they do some terrific work. They don't boast about it and pat themselves on the back about it. They just do it. They never open on Sunday. They never have in their 40-plus years of business, because Truett always had the attitude that he wanted his employees at least to be able to go to church. Most places where there is a McDonald's and a Chick-fil-A next to each other, Chick-fil-A will do more gross business in 6 days than a McDonald's will do in 7, which tells you to the testimony of God honors those who honor him. And when Dan, was basically saying what I think most people, at least where I come from, would say, not being mad at anybody, not condemning anybody, because I'm not mad at anybody, and if people choose to live a different lifestyle, I leave that between them and the Lord. But I do believe that we have a responsibility to defend a biblical and traditional understanding of marriage. And when people say, well, that's not really in the Bible, I say, really? Last time I checked, Jesus said a man shall leave his mother and father, and a woman shall leave her home. The two shall become one flesh. I said, that's pretty clear to me. And so, if that is a political liability for me to believe that, then so be it. Because 100 years from now, whatever office I have or don't have won't matter. So, when I saw Dan getting the daylights whacked out of him, and people were asking, hoping for his death, and just the most vile stuff. That's when I just mentioned to Truett, I said, I think we ought to have a Chick-fil-A appreciation day. Just ask everybody, don't carry signs, don't go screaming and yelling and making noise. This isn't a protest. This is an affirmation to a decent and good, patriotic, God-fearing man that ought to have folks stand with him. So I started talking about it that night on the television show 2 weeks ago. Following Monday, I started talking about it on my radio show, and then I sent out a few emails to some friends and asked them if they would pass the word. And the next thing you know, without any organization, without any, there wasn't any group that had coordinated this, it just caught fire on its own. And I just wanted to let you know, I had over 21 million views on my Facebook page in a 6-day period. Facebook got so upset about it that they shut us down and censored our page and deleted it for 13 hours because they said our message to encourage people to go eat Chick-fil-A wasn't in keeping with their community standards. And then we showed them some stuff that was on Facebook, like the promotion for the kiss-in, same-sex kiss-in on Friday, and said, how come eating a chicken sandwich is not in keeping with your standards, but kissing somebody of the same gender is? So they finally, at 11:30 that night, put us back up. But we lost a day, almost a full day from 11 in the morning until 11:30 that night, where they had taken the page down, censoring the page. That's not a story that has been widely reported. From there, it just began to explode. And I think one of the things that caused a lot of people to get very interested was when you saw mayors of cities like Boston and Chicago and San Francisco and Washington, D.C. openly say they would use their public offices to keep this business out of their communities. And I'm thinking, I expect that in North Korea or Iran, but not in the United States of America, where a person can do business irregardless of what the owner of the business has in his personal viewpoint. Now, if the company had denied people access as customers or employees because of some type of discrimination, I'd have been against them, not for them. But there was no evidence, no charges of that. In fact, they do the opposite. They treat their customers very well. And I'm not here to give a commercial for Chick-fil-A, although I probably could, I guess. Maybe I did, I guess, in some way. But I believe that if that business could be attacked because its owner had the same convictions that even Barack Obama claimed to have had until May of this year, and the same ones that Hillary Clinton professed 4 years ago when she ran for president, and that Joe Biden professed 4 years ago when he ran, and the same point of view that voters in 32 states, out of 32 states where it has been presented to the people, including liberal states like California and Maine, when they've had the opportunity to express themselves, they express the same point of view. And I just thought, wait a minute. How can a mayor, particularly Rahm Emanuel, come out in his smug, condescending way? How can Rambo go to this podium in Chicago and get up there and say that their values of Chick-fil-A are not Chicago values? I was thinking, well, since you got the murder capital of America, I guess they're probably glad it isn't. And the irony of that was that on the very day that Rahm Emanuel was condemning Chick-fil-A because its founder is a Christian, he had his arms around Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan, the very day praising him And I'm thinking, Louis Farrakhan is more against same-sex marriage than Dan Cathy. He's anti-Semitic and he's anti-woman. Now, you explain to me why you welcome Louis Farrakhan and you condemn Dan Cathy, and help me understand that. And I wanted to say to Tom Menino, the mayor of Boston, are you going to tell all the Catholic priests in your community who every Sunday faithfully discuss marriage as a sacrament of the church, as one man, one woman, who have been unwavering in their commitment to traditional marriage? Are you going to ask all the Catholics in Boston to vacate the city because they believe the same thing that Dan Cathy believes? And it finally just occurred to me that it is time for people in this country, not necessarily people who are Christian, although I think a lot of people who have been involved certainly would say they are. I'm just talking about a basic sense of old-fashioned American fairness, justice, and decency, where good and decent people stand up and say, enough is enough. We are tired of having a And I really realize that all this talk about bullying has happened from the left to the right. All the talk about hate speech, if you want to see some hate speech, you should see some of the stuff that people have said about me on the blogs and things written on my own Facebook page. And I let it post because I don't censor it. I figure that I might as well find out just exactly how much some people don't like me. Makes up for what my family says, so that's fine with me. And the fact is, after 22 years in politics, they can't say anything any worse than stuff I've already heard. But I think what happened this past Wednesday was not a significant day for me or even for Chick-fil-A, so much as it was a significant day for people all over this country between the two coasts who really do believe that America is a great nation, but can only be a great nation when we recognize that the foundation of our civilization, much less our nation, is when people have a sense that there is right and there's wrong, and that we treat people as if we wish to be treated. And again, I'm not into calling people names. I'm not into saying harsh, evil things to people because they disagree with me. I'll poke fun at some people, which I plan to do tonight. But not out of a spirit of meanness. And I don't want to see it in our political system. This election, I believe, in many ways is a reflection upon what we saw Wednesday. And I'm convinced with all my heart that if there was one thing America needs to do, it is to recognize that when we stand up and speak up, instead of being willing to be told to shut up, we can make a significant difference. Did you notice how quiet the left got for about 3 days this week? Because I don't think they expected record kind of turnout as happened. Traffic stopped in cities, not just in the South. They would have dismissed that as, well, those Southern, people, they're hopeless down there. Let me tell you what hopeless is. Hopeless is going to breakfast in New York and not being able to order grits because they've never heard of it. That's hopeless. But I understand they would have said, well, that's just some cultural thing about the South. But when those lines snaked around the corner in Chicago and in Los Angeles and in San Diego and in Denver and in New Jersey and Philadelphia and all over this country, it was an unbelievable message that was sent that there is a giant asleep in America that may have just decided to wake up and go get a chicken sandwich on Wednesday. And that's one of the best things I think we can accept in the country. I went out early that morning for breakfast at the local Chick-fil-A, and the manager was already preparing for a big day. He gave me this tie. I wore it on TV today, so if you watch the show tomorrow, I realize I'm probably keeping you from it tonight, which breaks my heart because I really need you to watch it. You'll notice this tie. What I didn't tell him, it's very subtle. It's a little kind of thing. I told him when he said, here, I want you to have my tie. I said, you know what, I'll just wear it on my show Saturday. So nobody knows that but y'all, so just so you know that. But here's what I think we need to recognize. Folks, America's in real trouble because we have set back And we've allowed people to take the offices of our land who do not share the convictions that we share when it comes to not only where we're going, but even where we've been. I'm not ashamed of the fact that there was a time in this country where the consensus of America was that this nation is an exceptional nation that only exists because people got on their knees before God before they ever got on their feet to fight for their freedom. And had they not been on their knees, had they not been on their knees, they would not have been able to withstand what they faced when they got on their feet. Do you realize what a miracle this country is? When I stop and think about a group of disjointed farmers and shopkeepers and pastors and school teachers who reached for the muskets over their mantle that were better suited for hunting rabbit than fighting a war, and they took on the greatest army of their time, the best equipped, the best trained, the best financed British army, coming by the thousands to put down this little rebellion that a bunch of rabble-rousers in this new and untested country had decided to put together. And they were determined that they would no longer be under the tyranny of a government that put its boot on their neck and would not get it off. And it wasn't just about high taxes, it was about the tyranny of taking away their everyday liberty and leaving them with very little to choose for their own families. They had come to this nation so they could worship as they wished, to live where they wanted to live, to take the jobs they wanted to take and not be stuck in some system that wherever they started was where they had to stop. And they said some bold, revolutionary things. And they put it on paper and they signed their names to it with extraordinary courage. I want you to think about these words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now that may sound a little old-fashioned. In fact, we've said it so many times now in this country that maybe we do forget. But put in the context of 1776, that statement was radical and revolutionary. To say that everybody was the same. I admit our country took a while to get it right. It was a long time before we gave people of color the same rights that we gave people who were white. And that's something we'll have to pay for all time. And we were wrong about that. We had the idea right, we didn't practice it right for a long time. We didn't let women vote for a long time. And we had that wrong. My goodness, we would never have a Republican Party now if it weren't for the Republican women, so thank God we gave them the right to vote. I always said I would never have been elected to anything had it not been for the Federation of Republican Women, and that is for sure. But the fact is, we didn't get it all right in terms of practice, but the policy we had right. That all of us are equal. And I want you to stop and think about just why that's so important, because it means that no matter where you came from and who your dad was and who your grandfather was and what your color was and what your gender was and how much money your parents had and how much land you owned, you were as valuable and worth as much and were just as important as anybody else. And your vote was equal to the rich man's vote. And that your voice was equal to the person who owned a whole lot more land than you did. That your worth as an individual was the same as the person who couldn't rub two nickels together. And the reason that that's important is because there's a whole bunch of us in this room who would not be enjoying the life we live as Americans today had it not been for that principle that we are a meritocracy, and that even if we grew up dirt poor, we did not have to stay that way. The reason I'm glad of that, I'm a generation away from dirt floors and no electricity, because that's how my mother grew up in South Arkansas. Some of you would tell the same story of your mother growing up in Alabama. My father never graduated from high school. His father didn't, and his father before him didn't. So the fact is, there's not one male upstream from me, excuse me, in my family, not one, who even graduated from high school, much less went to college. But you see, I grew up in America. And in this country, if I was willing to go to school and learn and get an education and work hard, and I might have to work a little harder than somebody whose family could give them something, but that's okay, because it served me well not to have a family who could give me a whole lot. I had to work harder to get it. And so I paid my own way through college, and I worked 40 hours a week while I was going to school and got through college. And it didn't make me a worse person, it made me a better person. And I'm going to tell you, the reason I love this country is because there aren't many places on this planet where a kid who grew up like I did would ever be able to stand here at this podium and talk to you and say, once I served as a governor of a country and had the rest of the country been as smart as the people in Alabama, heck, I'd been president by now. And when I heard the president not long ago talk about, well, if you have a successful business, you didn't build that. I'll say, pal, where I came from, that's fighting words. Because I know a lot of people who built businesses by starting out sketching their ideas on the kitchen table late at night when they were bone tired from the job they had. But they had a dream. And they worked hard, and they put everything they had. They borrowed money, and they took whatever they had. They mortgaged their homes, and they started a business. And more often than not, they had to take early days payroll right out of their own check and not pay themselves because they had other people that had to pay. And they took huge risks. And a lot of people don't make it. And the handful who do deserve our appreciation and our praise, not a kick in the backside for having built this country, because small business built this great country. We cannot afford to have leaders in our country that do not understand how our economy functions and succeeds. And it is not by punishing the people who do well and subsidizing the people who are reckless. Now, I've raised 3 kids. They're all grown now, and they're off on their own. They're all out of college, and they've got jobs. And I tell young parents all the time, the 2 greatest days in your life as a parent, the day your kid is born and the day that kid gets out of college, gets a job, and gets out on his own and gets off your payroll. Those are the 2 greatest days in your life as a parent. And now I've got 2 grandkids. If there was time, I'd show you several thousand pictures of them, but I won't do that to you because I do want you to get to you dinner. Here's what I learned raising kids. And then after the kids all got out of the house, my wife and I ended up with 3 dogs. The kids think we replaced the 3 of them with 3 dogs. We may have, for all I know. I mean, honestly, it wasn't intentional, but 3 kids, 3 dogs, you do the math. Now, the kids accuse us of loving the dogs and treating them better than we ever treated them. I just say to them, the dogs behave better than y'all ever did. But what I learned from raising kids and training dogs is pretty simple. If there is a behavior you want more of, reward the behavior. And if there is a behavior you want less of, consequence that behavior. Now, we used to just say spank them, but that'd probably get me thrown in jail somewhere now in this politically correct world. But you reward the behavior you want more of, and you punish the behavior you want less of. It's amazing how that works with kids and dogs, isn't it? It's amazing how stupid our government is when they don't realize that basic principle of human nature, because here's what we do. We have a government that thinks that if you really work hard, if you take risks, if those risks turn out to be successful, and you've been able to create jobs and hire more people and make other people prosperous, put food on their table, put clothes on their kids' backs, give their kids the opportunity to give an education because you took a risk and you were able to expand and give them those jobs, then we ought to punish you for your having been successful. And if you really get successful, we're going to raise your taxes where you'll regret ever having so many employees and so much success. But if you fail, if you recklessly manage your business right into bankruptcy, and you're so big and you're so reckless that you can't pay your bills anymore as a big company, whether you're AIG or Goldman Sachs or Lehman Brothers or General Motors, don't worry, Because Uncle Sugar will come in and bail you out and reward you for having recklessly mismanaged. And how will they get the money to bail out those who didn't take good care of their own business? They will take it from the people who did take good care of their business. Please understand, the election between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama is as simple as this. If you want to keep your job, you better hope Barack Obama loses his. And if you're determined for him to keep his job, you better be prepared to lose yours. Because the people that pay the salaries and the hourly wages of the folks who are still left with work are going to have that money taken from them. And I want to sometimes say, how do those employers get the money to pay your salary? Where do they get it? From profits. If they don't have profits, they don't have an opportunity to hire anybody. If you tax them and the profits are taxed out of the business, somebody has to go to pay for it. I rarely see a business owner who fires himself. This election is as fundamental as that. It's not about Mitt Romney's tax returns. I frankly don't care about his tax returns for the simple reason I can barely understand my own. I'm sure I couldn't understand Mitt Romney's tax returns. Obviously, the Treasury Secretary didn't understand his own tax returns, because Timothy Geithner couldn't fill his out with TurboTax. And now we have Harry Contrary Reid on the floor of the United States Senate. This is the most amazing thing yet. He said, the word is out, Mitt Romney hadn't paid taxes. Who put the word out, Harry? Oh, you did. That's right, the word is out. By his mouth. You see, when I was little, I used to have imaginary friends who talked to me. And if I could get in trouble, I'd tell my mother that my imaginary friend had actually done that. Harry Reid has an imaginary friend who has whispered this information to him, because he said it's somebody who called him. He can't remember the name. He doesn't really know who it is. He's not sure it's true, but by golly, he's on the floor of the Senate saying it anyway. I quit doing that stuff when I was 8 years old. Harry Reid's the Senate Majority Leader, and he's still doing it. It's time to send him and his colleagues home, and not only get a Republican president, but get a Republican Senate to go to the Republican House and get this country back on track. But if we're going to make that happen, I am convinced it's got to start, not just at the White House, it's got to start right here at the courthouse. I love what the state party of Alabama has adopted for its theme, because it is absolutely bedrock true. We need to elect decent people with a mind of common sense from the courthouse all the way to the White House. And that in Barber County means that in addition to going out and making sure Mitt Romney is the next president of the United States, and making sure that you elect state officials all over, like my friend Twinkle Kavanaugh as president of the Public Service Commission, that you elect folks at every courthouse and every local position. Alabama is blessed. You've got Republicans in every state office. That's amazing to me. But it's not good enough until all through the process you've got people who represent the values that we represent in this room. And I would simply say to you, that if you agree with what Barack Obama stands for as it relates to the role of business, which means you didn't do it, the government did. If you stand with Barack Obama on the issue of marriage, which he says now can mean anything people decide for it to mean, and this year's Democratic Party, for the first time in American history, will join the first time a president of the United States has ever advocated a definition of marriage outside of the biblical definition. Folks, this is a historic election. And if you're comfortable with a person who is willing to change that definition, and a person who believes that the government has more authority over your conscience than your church does, then go ahead and keep voting for Democrats from the courthouse to the White House. But if you believe in the First Amendment that says Congress shall pass no law that infringes upon your right of free speech, that infringes upon your right of worship, that cannot make you either prefer one religion over another and cannot prohibit the free practice of anybody's religion, then you better realize that this is not about just parties. This is about the bedrock fundamental principles that made America what it is today. And I want you to understand that the Obamacare provisions that are forcing churches and individuals and companies to provide abortion pills against their conscience is a test of the resolve of this nation. Whether or not we will believe that our government is more powerful than our soul, and whether we will believe that our government has more authority than God, and whether we believe that we are to bend our knee to the Baal of government rather than to the God of Isaac, Abraham, and Jacob. And I don't know about you, but I tell you here tonight, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, and if we have to do it in opposition to our government, then by God, that's what we're going to do. It is critical that we realize this is not just two different parties with different labels, but basically standing for the same thing. I'll be honest with you, there was a time in my life when there wasn't that big a difference between Democrats and Republicans. It was one group of organized people versus another group of organized people. You had some liberals in the Republicans, some conservatives in the Democrats, and there was some basic overriding principles between both parties, but they weren't that far apart. We basically agreed on national security, protecting us against enemies foreign and domestic. We basically believed that business was good. We ought to encourage people to raise capital, invest capital, and make something from capital so that we could create a better economy. We had a basic fundamental understanding that we needed bridges and policemen and firemen, and all those things were fundamental to our government, having an infrastructure where our commodes flushed and it went somewhere other than our yard. I mean, we get all that. And there was a time when really electing a Democrat or Republican wasn't a lot different. It was more a label. But I'm telling you, those days are over. And today, electing a Democrat or a Republican means the direction of this country 180 degrees differently. Because if there is, in fact, an idea that those of us who, whether we went to Chick-fil-A on Wednesday, ought to be told by government officials to shut up, then it's time that we say, no thank you. We will not sit in the back of the political bus. We will not be told to sit down and shut up. We will stand up, we will speak up, and we will vote. And we will take a stand, not just because it's something out of our own selfishness. It's because we have been blessed in this country, given a better country by our parents and grandparents than the one that they lived in. Lord knows I'm living in a better one than my parents and grandparents lived in. And I want to be able to say to my kids and my grandkids, we're going to give you an America that's better than the one I lived in. And if we don't make some fundamental changes in this country starting in November, I won't be able to say that. I'm going to either do it, or I'm going to die trying. And I'm hoping that what you'll do is ignite within your spirit and soul a determination that America will not go down on your watch. That you will not let this great country fail and fall because you did not recognize the threat and fight with all you had to get it back on track. That's what this election is about. It's not about Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. It's as fundamental. It's whether we want a nation like the one that our founders created, or if we want something so radically different that even the Europeans wouldn't recognize it. I tell you, it's time to stand. And I hope you will. God bless you, and thank you for letting me do that.